My pod today is entitled As the Crow Flies. The crow in question is Harlan Crow, who is a good best buddy for your boy Clarence Thomas, the probably pretty soon to be retiring Supreme Court justice, who has been making news over the last few years for allegations of corruption that Justice Thomas had been receiving gifts in the form of flights on private airplanes that were the plane was owned by Harlan Crow, and um, and not reporting those and other trips that he had taken, as is required under the embarrassingly lax reporting requirements for the Supreme Court. You know, the inferior courts, the courts below, have more strict reporting requirements to avoid the. I mean, it's almost quaint since your president DJT is the most corrupt president in United States history. That we're talking about corruption like it's forbidden, but we'll get back there. We'll get there back there eventually. It's just that John Roberts, as chief, has done very little to improve what is a deficit in the rules that would provide more transparency for the most important court in the land. You would think. I mean, they're lawyers. They could probably figure something out. It's just that they have so much tied to their 401ks. The way that those sorts of things are normally handled is with blind trusts, where where you swear that another party is making investment decisions on your behalf, and that you can't. The allegations with Clarence is that money was funneled to him and through his wife, who we'll get back to, because she is as I stated about another party earlier today, she is a habitual line stepper, Ginny Thomas, and looks like a harridan, old term, but just a complete loose cannon. And she is a supporter of ultra, ultra right causes. And she was contacting members of Congress after the 2020 election and saying, don't certify the votes. And this is who you should hire as an attorney. And this is, she's just a bad apple. She doesn't fly her flags upside down like Sam Melito's wife does, but she's an attorney from, I'm going to say, she came from Nebraska, Creighton, under in law school, and she has been prominent with far right causes in the U.S. for a long time. And but Clarence. So we have to go back a little bit to the beginning, because for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of enjoying Clarence in your life for as long as I have, Clarence is he's 78 approximately, right? Humble beginnings, and ended up at the College of the Holy Cross in my great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then went on to Yale Law School. He was a fellow alumnus of Yale Law School. I mean, there are lots of them. It's a great, great law school. Many Supreme Court justices, but one Ms. Anita Hill, who would be a key player in the drama that has been Clarence Thomas's life. So, Thomas was, undergrad summa cum laude. He went on to Yale, reportedly did very well, and went out and did various things that lawyers do when they start out. And when he ran into Anita Hill, it's when they were both working at first the Department of Education and then at the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And now those interactions, when they were working together there, were the substance of her accusations during his confirmation hearings. And we're going back. I mean, he was nominated by George Bush the elder. That's George Herbert Walker Bush, as opposed to George W. Bush, the younger of Iraq fame. So, but the father, a marvelous man of great integrity, and served his country in glorious fashion in war and afterwards, director of CIA, and he came after he served one term after Ronald Reagan. He was Reagan's vice president, and he nominated Clarence Thomas, to replace. Um, he nominated him to the court in '91, which would have been his last year on the court. His exploits, he was a junior. He would have started as a junior man, and probably would have just rolled along, marvelously intelligent human being. But he was. It seems Clarence was a little handsy, and during his time at both the Department of Education at the EEOC, he would regale. Well, Anita, we know about, probably others, because he's probably just that kind of guy. With lots of invitations to go out and do things, and when she said she wasn't interested, he would make up little stories and scenarios to entertain her. And one of them involved a porn star named Long Dong Silver. I, you know, he was, that he was talking about porn stars in a work environment, and she found that to be offensive, like any other human being would find offensive. And there were other stories of equally repulsive behavior. And when the hearings came, she made statements and detailed that, and she was part of the hearing and faced Anita Hill. If Clarence Thomas is an African American gentleman, Anita Hill is an African American woman. She also went to Yale, as I mentioned, and equally brilliant and accomplished. And but she was sitting in front of the old boys network of the Senate, and she wasn't given a fair and honest hearing for her allegations. Yeah, well, it was 1990 something. I'm not making excuses. Time doesn't cure everything, like slavery and other injustices. But the view, this was 30 years before Me Too. So the role of women in the workplace, and how that is viewed differently now than it was in 1990, right? Which is 35 years ago from now. It was different. I mean, I was in the workplace then, and it was, incidents of people making, off-color comments. The lines that were properly drawn later about, this is where you work. You're not, propositioning women uh, who you work with is not appropriate behavior. And this was, she went through obviously a lot in work. I mean, I couldn't imagine being in the room with Clarence Thomas for more than 3 minutes. She had to put up with a lot when she worked with him, and then the scrutiny that she was put under. You know, are you sure that you didn't misunderstand what he was? Typical kind of old boy network. You would think more probably it was, old boy white network. I mean, if he was, oh, I don't know, how about uh, Kavanaugh there instead? They would have just they would have thrown her out. If it were that sort of old boy network, and Kavanaugh, of course, will come later in the story because he was credibly accused of sexual improprieties, suggestive behavior, pinning a woman to the floor in a dorm during a party in college, and again, credible accusations, and he squeaked by. As Thomas, yeah, I think Thomas was he made it through 52 to 48. I think was the. I mean, I remember watching the hearings, and it was. I was. I was not a. I was not a practicing attorney at that point. I took time off and worked before I did those silly things. But I remember that because it was such and it was also, you think about the dawn, if you were around at that time, then things in during the, excuse me, during the Reagan era, we had Iran Contra, Ollie North, and that was kind of that was the beginning of CNN and television news coverage that was, going towards a 24-hour model. And back in those days, that was pretty exciting stuff because there wasn't, the Reagan administration. He was doing little FAFO kind of things in Grenada, and then Bush did them in Panama. But yeah, so Anita Hill put up with a lot, and she, by doing so and behaving with such tremendous dignity, kind of started the ball rolling on that we'll call pre Me Too era, and where she was vocal in standing up for herself and saying that she was treated in an inappropriate way in the workplace, and we thank her for that. Then I'm going to skip ahead to because I'm going to run out of sunlight, and maybe my appetite will be ruined if I talk about Thomas too much. But the the most important, junior when you're when you're the most junior guy on the court, on top of the fact that you were the second black person, happens to be a man, on the court, then you're not writing a lot of decisions. You're sitting, which is appropriate. That's all junior members of the court should sit back and learn. Now, who you're learning from, that's something else entirely. I think that Thomas, he didn't clerk for Rehnquist? Not sure. But he, by all accounts, perfectly suitable justice. And other than his, it's a big other than, but other than his inappropriate behavior towards Anita Hill, he just kind of rolled along like they all do when they're newbies. When it got really interesting was in the 90s. Excuse me. In around two, one was the evolution of Clarence Thomas. The interesting part was when he was a younger man and a law student, he was pretty active in student movements that would be appropriate for a young black intellectual. now he's from Holy Cross. So, um, you know, he was at least more middle of the road. His evolution to the right was pretty quick and pretty drastic. Because if you look at his the opinions that he's joined, um, it is pretty eye opening. He's gone all the way full MAGA. You know, interesting with the also as the years went on, and Ginny would over many years. The again the reporting requirements are rather uh, lax, and so conservative causes, conservative contributors would often funnel money through Ginny Thomas's firm when she was acting as either she was an attorney, but also a political consultant to ultra right groups. And yeah, so she would. I guess the one that stands out the most that relates to the time we're in right now is Shelby County, which is one of the most important voting rights cases in our history, and it was decided 5-4 with Justice Thomas not writing for the majority, but joining in the opinion. And that was the first very violent evisceration of voting rights. You know, the one of the elements of voting rights that was so important. The argument with the conservative right is that okay, this is correcting wrongs from too far in the past. We don't have a race problem anymore. That's not what this country is these days, and that's back a number of years ago. That this is not what it was at the Justice Chief Justice John Roberts said the best way to I'm going to flub it, but the best way to I'm not going to go there. I'm going to post it in the because I just blanked out completely. But the essence of what Judge Roberts said was if you want to talking about a basket of things, including affirmative action, that if you don't want a race problem, don't talk about race. And that is a oversimplification of a complex issue. But if you look at the history of the cases as they went through the Supreme Court, and this isn't just a legal issue, this is a political issue. The conservative base, as they grew in strength, and Donald Trump, 3 appointments in his first term, and he'll get 2 more bites at the apple at least this term with both Thomas and Alito retiring. So think about that Donald J. Trump, your boy, will be responsible for appointing a majority of the Supreme Court at that time, 3 plus 2. Old school math, that's still more than half of 9, I think. It's absolutely shocking. And the relative age of those appointments is young, and the 2 that will come now will be straight out of the stroller. And Amy Coney Barrett is a very young woman, and fun fact: Amy Coney Barrett is the only Supreme Court justice that graduated number 1 in her law school class. Does that make her best judge ever? No, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a competitor. She went to Notre Dame. So some would say, "Oh, well, it's not Harvard." Okay, you're right, it isn't. But it's a real law school with smart people. She went on to teach there as well. But just a fun side note to the Supreme Court. So basically with Shelby County, the thing was the prior authorization part of that whole thing is that if any state was going to make substantial changes to laws related to voting that would impact minorities in any way, then the Justice Department would be able to look in on that. You know, that is that was one of the tenets. I don't know if it was 4.5 or 5, but I think it was 4.5, which gave the framework for evaluating whether the the proposed changes would violate the Voting Rights Act, and then when that was swept out, 5 was rendered moot because without the framework for evaluating the legality of a proposed change to the law, then the enforcement mechanism without the test was completely useless. So that was essentially the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, and they're going to take the remnants are going to be with a case named Calais, and there's some arguing about because my Cajun accent, Acadian Cajun accent is probably a little rusty. Is Calais the correct pronunciation? It's a case in front of the court now, and that's probably going to eliminate or otherwise um, uh, take a hatchet to the remaining parts of the Voting Rights Act. So Clarence Thomas, and he could have swung that either way in a 5-4 decision in Shelby County, that he was the deciding vote. And is it appropriate for a cracker like this guy to call a African American man a Tom for Uncle Tom, for Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe novel written in 1850, written more than a decade before the Civil War, obviously. Slavery, yes, in full effect. But, that expression, and I'll take creative license and apologize to anybody that's affronted. But, when I look at people like Clarence Thomas and look at guys like Tim Scott, I wrote a earlier, call it satirical, call it absurdist tale called the Tom Tom Club, which is in one of my feeds, and I'll repost it with or near this feed. And it just talks about that you might have guessed I've never been an African American man, right? Stipulated. Am I qualified to comment as a member of the 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 Cracker Club on the profound effects of institutional racism over the many, many, many centuries? No, I'm certainly not qualified to comment on it. But as a commentator on political and legal issues, then I'm going to take a little shot once in a while. And these are easy people to take a shot at because they're easy targets. And as I pointed out in my quote unquote fictionalized account called Tom Tom Club, is Clarence Thomas and Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, who gets to work with Lindsey Graham. These are two guys that married outside of the faith, and I mean way outside of the faith, and have taken every opportunity throughout their career to slash every leveling principle that makes up for the injustices, tries to make up for past injustices of institutional racism, right? So affirmative action, these guys, No, no, anything that smells of affirmative action. You see what that does. I'm trying to talk in the. One of their facile, silly ass fucking. One of the arguments I disagree with is that it, what it does for people of color, affirmative action, is unfair to them ultimately, because by leveling the playing field, you're somehow demeaning their accomplishments. Yeah. Well, if you are the top in your college class, number one in your college class, and get into Harvard, and you're an African American or a Latino American or an Asian American, and you don't need any consideration, fine. Congratulations. Move on. But if you look downstream, that the impact of racism was not limited to the period of time when slavery before slavery was outlawed. And as we all know, just because it was outlawed, it didn't mean it ended. And when Jim Crow laws came into effect because the white Southerners were getting a little bit uncomfortable with this whole free slave thing, right? This, it's almost it's ludicrous to think about that. The Jim Crow laws as a reaction to racism coming back as kind of like a slingshot effect after all of the brilliant work that Abraham Lincoln and like-minded people accomplished. But how ludicrous is it? Here we are today, and all of the burn the books, can't teach about history anymore, as if it talks about white people doing bad things, because white people were great at all times. They were fantastic. And so the slavery thing, obviously, I'm talking like some redneck maybe. The slavery thing was overplayed, obviously. It wasn't, we didn't really know what we were doing, and it was just business and whatever. You've heard the apologists and the racists uh, justifying past bad behaviors to try to whitewash and change history. And to have Tim Scott and Clarence Thomas helping them do that, burning the books. You don't need to teach about those lessons anymore in public schools, because that would make white people sad. How sad for the white people that have to learn about history, right? It's just absolutely outrageous. So I'm going to zig through Harlan Crow, connect it to Ginny, and then go inside and wish you a beautiful evening. Harlan Crow is his dad started a real estate company, a massive, extraordinarily successful real estate company that may have been founded in Texas. I think Trammell Crow, and they have assets under management are tens of billions of dollars. Harlan Crow net worth, a couple brothers, I think, is a few billion, enough to get by. And he supports pretty extreme right conservative programs, issues, institutions, everything he can. But he became Clarence Thomas's main patron, and throughout his career, he really he isn't part of Heritage, although he's sympathetic and supports and funds them. Right. So he is Leonard Leo, who is the Heritage connection. Who Leo was the one that made up the lists for Trump of the candidates he should look at, and got them Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh. So very influential. Again, they're not married, but they're fellow travelers in the ultra right world. So these all of these trips to, I mean, he took Clarence, presumably with his wife. I don't know. I didn't see the manifest. You know, not just around the trips around the corner on the private plane, sure. Trips to legal retreat speaking engagements, sure, but also to Hawaii and New Zealand. You know, this plane, he has what does he have? He has to say Russell Crowe, Russell Crowe, um, Mr. Crowe, um, has a Bombardier, right? One of those Shishi Gulfstream alternatives. And, you know, the cost per flight hour of those planes is something like $10,000, right? Per hour. Yeah. So of course, we'd all like to fly private, but that's a lot for anybody that isn't named Trump or CZ. So, and then instead of giving bags of cash to Clarence, what what those guys would do, Leo and Harlan Crow, is to hire Ginny Thomas to do whatever. And reportedly, in the last 5 odd years or so, $600,000 donations. Now, that doesn't mean everything that went into the those organizations that she can quote unquote consulted for went into their family's coffers. We don't have that kind of visibility. It's only that to give a perspective on the enormity of the donations. It's a lot of money. It's a tremendous amount of money. So um, that's Ginny and her darling husband. So they benefited tremendously from that Harlan Crow relationship, and it still goes to this day, and will continue to do so. And I didn't find any evidence of Crow flying any other Supreme Court justices around, but he's pumping money into every conceivable conservative cause, elections or otherwise, right? And there is a direct connection that, you know, Leo, Crow, Project 2025, those are all, they use the same shells in the shell game, and they flush money into one organization and into the other one, and you know, all the post the campaign finance sham laws that were eviscerated by the original laws that were eviscerated by Citizens United. So it's a shell game, but it's a shell game by the tens of millions of dollars that are go into slush funds and then go out to candidates, and they're going for, I'll show my glove, but you know, uh, causes, right? I'm not giving it to the candidate. I'm giving it to a cause that I believe a lot in. I believe this is, overturning Roe, hundreds of millions of dollars, conservative fundraising. So it's all hand in glove, as it were, as the kids say. So this episode was As the Crow Flies. The crow is Russell Crowe, and the crow is Jim Crow, because old Jim is flying back to 2026. And as we're seeing on our streets and in our schools and in the legislatures, that restrictions on Black and brown people, indignities that once were there were laws that would protect against such behavior And one of the most consequential was the Voting Rights Act, the VRA, and that, as we just talked about, through Shelby County and a couple little recent, uh, not a not a full on stabbing, but more the thousand cuts variety where you bleed out slowly. And that's what they've done, and that's part of the strategy, because they didn't want to. The court doesn't want to face the blowback of shredding every affirmative action, voting rights. They would like to. They have the majority. Those are their marching orders from the people that pay them, right? From the people, the conservative causes, from Leonard Leo and from Harlan Crow, is to another name that I'll throw in, because you will have known this already because of the names that I mentioned and heritage, but the Koch brothers and um, Koch Industries is they are the other, you know, 15 billion billionaires, whatever, big time players that are funneling money into these organizations to, eviscerate. They don't want, they want no abortion. They don't methylpristone. No, they want no, they prefer if the court could claw back gay marriage permission. So, yeah, these are dark times, but all we can do is focus on the midterm and take it one step at a time, while high on the horizon. But let's focus on the midterms, because then, if the Voting Rights Act remainder is eviscerated, then we'll have some other problems down the line in majority African American districts in certain southern states in the aftermath of the Voting Rights Act being pronounced dead. But we'll face that when we get there. We'll just wish you a beautiful evening. Think about Clarence. Think about if you don't know about a pube on a Coke can, look it up, kids. Uh, I guess after you have dinner. Yeah, but that was part of the Anita Hill hearing. And what I will put, I'll link to my distasteful but maybe entertaining Tom Tom Club, which is in one of the, not in this main feed, but in one of the other ones that I had that I've got to clean up sometime this weekend. And also I want to put in the specific language that Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts used to explain and white-splain how we get rid of racial issues in this country, which is just absolutely fucking ridiculous. So, pleasure as always. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening, and we'll look for you sometime tomorrow. Thanks.